The thing about Galactic Union training facilities is that they're designed by committee, which means they're designed by idiots. Outpost Theta 9 was no exception. Sprawling, needlessly complex, with corridors that led nowhere and training rooms that could have been half the size. But hey, when you're trying to accommodate 83 different species, all with their own breathing requirements, gravitational preferences, and, let's be honest, egos the size of small moons, efficiency takes a back seat to politics. And politics, as it turned out, were about to become very, very relevant. Hallie didn't care much for politics. The human woman, 26 standard years old, with dark hair she kept tied back, and a collection of scars she'd earned the hard way, was more interested in getting through her final rotation without punching any instructors. It was her last month at Theta 9, completing advanced security systems training, and she was counting down the days until she could get back to Earth. Or at least somewhere that served actual coffee instead of the synthetic swill the station passed off as a hot beverage. "You know," she said, sidestepping a lumbering Horthax in the corridor, "for a place that's supposed to teach us about security, they really don't lock down their maintenance access very well." Her roommate, Lux, made a chittering sound that might have been laughter. The Kepri was a full head shorter than Hallie, with iridescent chitin that shifted between blue and green depending on the light, and compound eyes that made it impossible to tell where she was looking. 4 arms meant she could carry all their gear, while Hallie kept her hands free, a division of labor they'd worked out in the first week of rooming together. "Perhaps they assume trainees will not abuse that knowledge," Lux said, her voice soft and melodic, each word carefully pronounced. The Kipri didn't have vocal cords like humans. They created sound by vibrating specialized membranes in their thorax, which gave their speech a musical quality that made even mundane statements sound poetic. "Then they haven't met humans," Hallie replied, grinning. "We see a rule. We immediately start looking for ways around it. It's practically our species' defining trait." They rounded a corner into Training Bay 16, where their cohort was already gathering. 23 trainees from a dozen different species, all looking varying degrees of exhausted, annoyed, or, in the case of the 2 Feltalk brothers, actively hostile. The Feltalk didn't like humans much, something about humanity being upstart primitives who stumbled into faster-than-light travel through sheer dumb luck. Hallie had corrected them once. It wasn't dumb luck. It was a combination of desperate innovation and a concerning disregard for safety protocols. But they hadn't appreciated the distinction. Instructor Kef, a Mulrin with too many teeth and not enough patience, was already at the front of the bay, arms crossed. "You're late." "We're on time," Hallie said, checking her wrist display. "We're just not early." Kef's eye stalks swiveled in what might have been annoyance. Hard to tell with Mulrins. "On time is late. Early is on time. This is basic military protocol, trainee." Right. I'll add it to the list of things that make no logical sense, but we do anyway." Hallie moved to her usual spot, Lux following close behind. The Kepri always stayed close to Hallie during training sessions, not because she was afraid, exactly, but because the other trainees had a tendency to treat her like she was fragile, which was hilarious, considering Lux could have calculated the structural integrity of the entire station in her head, while simultaneously hacking into its mainframe. Not that anyone bothered to find that out. They just saw the nervous insectoid who flinched at loud noises and decided she was weak. People were idiots. This was a universal constant, apparently. "Today," Kef announced, his mandibles clicking, "we will be running hand-to-hand combat scenarios. You'll be paired randomly. No, Feltalk, you cannot request partners. And you'll demonstrate proper restraint techniques as outlined in Galactic Union enforcement protocols. A collective groan went through the bay. Hand-to-hand combat was nobody's favorite, except maybe the Corlith, who had natural armor plating and thought getting punched was relaxing. And Hallie, who'd grown up in a part of Earth where knowing how to fight wasn't optional. "Trainee Hallie," Kef said, his eye stalks focusing on her with what might have been malicious glee. "You'll be demonstrating first. Your opponent will be Trainee Mox." Mox was one of the Feltok brothers. 2 meters tall, covered in dense muscle, with 4 arms and an attitude problem. He grinned. Feltok grins involved way too many teeth, and cracked his knuckles. All 16 of them. "Oh, this should be fun," Hallie muttered. Lux's antennae drooped. "Perhaps you could request a different partner? Mox has been unkind." "Mox has been an ass," Hallie corrected. "But that's fine. I've dealt with worse." She stepped into the sparring circle, a marked area on the floor that was supposed to keep fights contained, though, in practice, it just gave everyone a better view of who was getting their butt kicked. Mox followed, rolling his shoulders, clearly expecting this to be over in seconds. Instructor Kef raised one clawed hand. "Restraint techniques only. No lethal force, no permanent injury. The goal is to subdue your opponent, not hospitalize them. Begin." Mox charged immediately, because of course he did. Feltok weren't big on strategy. They preferred the hit it until it stops moving approach to problem-solving. Hallie waited until he was almost on her, then dropped low, sweeping his legs. Mox's forward momentum did the rest, sending him crashing face first into the mat. Before he could recover, she was on his back, one arm, wrenched behind him in a lock that would have made her old instructor proud. "Yield," she said calmly. Mox snarled something in Feltok that definitely wasn't polite, then tapped the mat twice. Hallie released him immediately and stepped back. The bay was silent for about 3 heartbeats. Then one of the Corlith started laughing, a sound like rocks grinding together, and the spell broke. "Adequate," Instructor Kef said, which was the closest he ever came to praise. "Trainee Mox, you telegraphed your attack. Trainee Hallie, your form was functional. Next pair." Hallie returned to Lux's side, ignoring the glares from Mox and his brother. The Kepri's antennae were quivering, her species equivalent of excited bouncing. "That was impressive," Lux whispered. "That was basic," Hallie replied. "He's strong, but strength doesn't matter if you can't land a hit." The rest of the session continued in much the same way. Trainees paired off, some doing better than others, while Kef critiqued everyone's technique with equal opportunity disdain. Hallie watched, mentally cataloging weaknesses and strategies. It was habit at this point. She'd spent so much time studying how different species fought that she could probably write a manual on it. Not that anyone would read it. The Galactic Union's official stance on human combat techniques was that they were unnecessarily brutal and lacking in honor, which was a fancy way of saying humans fought to win, not to look good doing it. By the time the session ended, Hallie was ready to get back to their quarters, maybe grab some food, and definitely avoid thinking about the mountain of theoretical coursework she still had to complete before graduation. Lux was quiet as they walked, more so than usual, her antennae drooping. "You okay?" Hallie asked. Oh yes, just thinking? About?" Lux hesitated, her mandibles clicking softly. "It is nothing. Just, there is much to consider with graduation approaching." That was a non-answer if Hallie had ever heard one, but she didn't push. Lux would talk when she was ready. That was how their friendship worked. Hallie didn't pry, Lux didn't judge, and they both ignored the fact that they were probably the strangest roommate pairing on the entire station. Their quarters were in Section 12, a long walk from the training bays, but at least relatively quiet. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing the small space they'd called home for the past 8 months. 2 sleeping platforms, Lux's modified for her physiology, a shared workspace cluttered with data pads and equipment, and a kitchenette that neither of them used because station food was, to put it mildly, depressing. Hallie dropped her gear bag by the door and headed straight for the small cooling unit, pulling out a ration pack that claimed to be Terran-style pasta, but looked more like someone's idea of a practical joke. Lux moved to her workspace, all 4 arms organizing her study, materials with practiced efficiency. For a moment, everything was normal. Just another evening on Theta 9, counting down the days until freedom. Then Lux's antennae went rigid, a sign Hallie had learned meant something was very, very wrong. "Hallie," Lux said quietly, her melodic voice strained, "I need to tell you something." Hallie set down her questionable pasta. "What's going on?" Lux started, then stopped, her compound eyes fixed on something only she could see. Her smaller pair of arms twisted together nervously. "I have been receiving messages from my family. They are concerned." "Concerned about what?" "There are rumors on my homeworld about the Genetic Preservation Act being used for—" The door exploded inward. Not figuratively. Not a polite override or an authorized entry. The access panel sparked, the locking mechanism shrieked in protest, and the door literally flew off its track, clattering across the floor in a shower of debris. 6 figures stormed in, armored and armed, moving with the kind of synchronized precision that marked them as professionals. Galactic Union enforcement. The patches on their shoulders made that clear, even if their aggressive entry hadn't. The lead operative was massive, even by alien standards. Mordane species, Hallie recognized, built like someone had taken a bear, given it anger management issues, and then covered it in natural body armor. His face was all hard angles and barely contained violence, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like gravel being chewed. "Lux of Kepri Prime," he growled. "You are under arrest for violations of the Genetic Preservation Act. Come quietly, and you will not be harmed." Lux made a sound, high-pitched, terrified, the kind of noise Hallie had never heard from her before. She backed up, all 4 arms raised defensively, antennae flat against her head. And Hallie, still holding her terrible pasta, felt something cold and sharp settle in her gut. "Oh," she thought, "this is going to be a problem. Here's the thing about humans that most of the galaxy hasn't figured out yet. They're really, really good at going from 0 to violent when someone they care about is threatened. It's not a bug in the programming, it's a feature. Millions of years of evolution on a planet that actively tried to kill them on a daily basis tends to produce a species that doesn't handle threats well. Or rather, handles them extremely well, depending on your perspective." Hallie set down her pasta very carefully. The container made a small plastic sound against the counter, absurdly loud in the sudden tension of the room. "That's funny," she said, her voice conversational, "because I don't remember anyone mentioning an arrest warrant coming through today. Don't those usually require, paperwork? Due process? Any of those boring legal things the Union supposedly cares about?" The Mordane, Commander Thux, according to the name stenciled on his armor, didn't even look at her. In his defense, humans weren't exactly intimidating by Galactic Union standards. No natural armor, no combat-adapted physiology, no venom or claws or any of the fun biological weapons that made other species dangerous. Just soft skin, blunt teeth, and a whole lot of audacity. "This does not concern you, human," Thux said, still focused on Lux. "Step aside." "See, that's where you're wrong." Hallie moved, not between them yet, just shifting her weight, changing her position from casual to ready. "Everything that happens in this room concerns me, shared quarters and all. So I'll ask again, where's the warrant?" One of the other operatives, a sleek Felian with too many joints in all the wrong places, actually laughed. "Direct orders from the Council supersede local warrant requirements. Now move, or we move you." Hallie glanced at Lux, who was pressed against the far wall, trembling. The Kepri's compound eyes were wide, and her mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme distress in her species. Behind the operatives, Hallie could see their equipment: standard enforcement gear, tasers, restraints, and a neural suppressor. She recognized it from her training modules. Nasty piece of work, designed to overwhelm nervous systems and induce compliance. For most species, it was uncomfortable. For Kepiri, with their distributed neural architecture and hypersensitive nerve clusters, it was basically torture. The cold feeling in Hallie's gut turned into something hot and sharp. "Lux," she said quietly, "what's this about?" I don't," Lux's voice broke. "My family. They refused to participate in the breeding quotas. They said it was wrong, that the program was being used to control us, to make us more." "Enough," Thux snapped. He gestured to two of his operatives. "Take her. Suppress if she resists." The operatives moved forward. Lux made that high-pitched noise again, backing into the corner, all four arms raised in a futile gesture of protection. And Hallie made a decision. Later, when she had time to think about it, which wouldn't be for a while, she'd recognize it as the moment everything changed. The moment she went from trainee to fugitive, from law-abiding citizen to wanted criminal. But in the moment, it was simple. They were going to hurt her friend. That wasn't acceptable. So she stepped between them. "Last chance," she said, her voice flat. "Turn around, walk out, come back with proper documentation. We'll sort this out through legal channels like civilized beings." The Felian operative reached for her, not even aggressively, just a casual grab to move her aside, the way you'd move a piece of furniture that was in the way. Hallie broke his arm in two places. It happened fast, faster than the operatives expected, certainly faster than they'd thought a human could move. She caught his wrist, twisted, used his own momentum against him, and there was a very satisfying crack-snap sound as joints bent in, directions they weren't designed to go. The Felian screamed, a sound like tearing metal, and dropped. The room exploded into motion. The other operatives came at her all at once, which was their first mistake. Professional training said to engage threats individually, maintain formation, use numerical advantage strategically. But they were angry now, and angry people, angry beings, whatever, make stupid choices. Hallie dropped under the first punch, a corelith, armored fist moving like a battering ram, and swept his legs. His armor made him strong, but it also made him top-heavy. He went down hard, crashing into the Felian she'd already injured. Operative number 3, a Hulmex with retractable claws, came at her from the side. Smart, using the chaos as cover. Not smart enough. Hallie grabbed her gear bag, the one she'd dropped by the door, full of training equipment and personal items that were about to become improvised weapons, and swung it like a club. 15 kilos of assorted hardware caught the Hulmex in the head, and he went down in a heap. "You know what your problem is?" Hallie said, breathing hard, circling to keep all the remaining operatives in view. "You trained for compliant suspects, people who follow rules, who back down when you show up with badges and authority. Operative 4 and 5 came at her together. Better tactics, finally. But they made the mistake of trying to grapple. Grappling works great when you're stronger than your opponent. Less great when your opponent knows exactly where all your vulnerable joints and nerve clusters are and has zero compunction about exploiting them. Hallie got 4 in a chokehold. Harder than it sounds when dealing with a species that has 3 separate airways, but she'd studied their anatomy in her xenobiology coursework, and used him as a shield when 5 tried to taser her. The electrical discharge hit 4 instead, and he convulsed, and Hallie shoved his twitching body into 5 hard enough to send them both crashing into the workspace. Datapads and equipment went flying. Lux yelped, pressing harder against the wall, her antennae flat. The thing is, Hallie continued, vaulting over the fallen operatives, humans don't really do compliance. We're contrary by nature. You tell us to stand down, we start calculating odds. And right now? She grabbed Operative 5 by his equipment harness and introduced his face to her knee. The satisfying crunch suggested she'd broken something important. Right now, the odds say I'm angrier than you're prepared for. Which left Commander Thux. The Mordane hadn't moved yet, watching the chaos with what might have been surprise, or might have been calculation. Hard to read expressions on a face that looked like it had been carved from granite by someone who was really mad at granite. "Impressive," he said, his gravel voice actually sounding genuine. "For a human." "Thanks. I've been working out." Hallie rolled her shoulders, feeling the adrenaline singing through her system. 5 down, 1 to go. Her quarters were destroyed. The workspace was matchsticks, the cooling unit was sparking, and there was a Felian-shaped dent in the wall. But Lux was still safe. That was what mattered. Thux pulled his weapon, not a taser, something heavier, military grade, and Hallie's calculation changed. She could dodge maybe 1 shot, 2 if she was lucky. But he was between her and the door, and Lux was behind her, and there was exactly 1 play left. "You're making a mistake," Thux said, charging the weapon. "Stand down, and you'll face minimal charges. Continue, and—" Hallie threw the cooling unit at him. Not the whole thing. That would have been impossible, even with adrenaline. But the door of the cooling unit, already damaged from when the Corlith had crashed into it, which she'd grabbed while Thux was monologuing, because villains always monologue, and really, you'd think people would learn. The metal door hit Thux square in the chest, didn't do much damage to his armored hide, but did exactly what it needed to do. Surprised him, made him flinch, gave Hallie 3 seconds of opening. She closed the distance between them like a sprinter, got inside his guard before he could aim the weapon, and did something she'd learned from a very questionable self-defense instructor back on Earth. She went for the eyes. Mordanes might have had natural armor plating, redundant organs, and enough muscle mass to bench press a small vehicle, but their eyes were still eyes. Soft, vulnerable, really important for things like aiming weapons and not walking into walls. Thux roared, an actual roar, like someone had given a lion a megaphone, and swung blindly. His fist caught Hallie in the ribs, lifted her off her feet, and sent her crashing into what remained of their entertainment console. Pain exploded through her side. Definitely cracked ribs, possibly broken. Her vision went white for a heartbeat, then red, then cleared enough to see Thux stumbling. 1 hand over his eyes, the weapon dropped. Hallie grabbed the weapon, heavier than it looked, not designed for human hands, and smashed it against Thux's knee. The joint bent sideways with a crunch that she felt more than heard. The Mordane went down, still roaring, and Hallie hit him again, this time in the head. He stopped roaring. The room went quiet, except for the sparking of broken electronics and Hallie's ragged breathing. 6 operatives, all down. Some unconscious, some just wishing they were unconscious, all thoroughly out of the fight. Hallie dropped the weapon and pressed a hand to her ribs, feeling the sharp spike of pain that meant, yep, definitely broken. Moving was going to be fun for the next few weeks. Hallie! Lux's voice was tiny, terrified. Hallie, what did you— Don't. Hallie straightened, ignoring the protest from her ribs. Don't apologize. Don't freak out. Not yet. We've got maybe 15 minutes before someone notices these. Guys went dark. We need to— She stopped, finally noticing what had been there the whole time. What her adrenaline-soaked brain had filed away as unimportant, but was actually very, very important. The security cameras, 3 of them, mounted in the corners of the room, standard surveillance equipment for all trainee quarters, recording everything, every second, feeding directly to station security, recording Hallie assaulting 6 Galactic Union enforcement operatives. Oh, she said quietly, we are so incredibly screwed. The cameras blinked their steady red lights, patient, impassive, completely unconcerned with the fact that they'd just recorded what was probably the most career-ending 15 minutes of Hallie's life, which, considering some of the questionable choices she'd made back on Earth, was really saying something. Okay, Hallie said, more to herself than to Lux. Okay, this is fine. This is totally fine. We just assaulted 6 enforcement officers, it's all on camera, and backup is definitely coming. Totally manageable situation. That does not sound fine, Lux whispered, still pressed against the wall, all 4 arms wrapped around herself. Hallie, you should not have— They were going to— I am not worth— Stop. Hallie pointed at her, wincing at the pain the movement caused. Don't finish that sentence. You are worth it. We're handling this, and I really need you to not fall apart on me right now because I have a plan. You have a plan? I have the beginning of a plan, which is better than no plan. Hallie moved to the terminal on what remained of their workspace, her fingers already flying across the interface. The cameras feed to station security, but station security routes through the main network, which means if we can access the security partition, we can— Delete the footage, Lux finished, her voice still shaky but gaining strength. Her antennae lifted slightly. But that is, the encryption is military grade. It would take hours to break, and you said we have 15 minutes. Yeah, that's the part of the plan I'm still working on. Hallie pulled up the security network architecture using the credentials she'd definitely not borrowed from Instructor Kef's terminal 3 weeks ago when he'd made the mistake of leaving it unlocked. The network map appeared, a sprawling web of connections and protocols that made her head hurt just looking at it. Behind her, one of the operatives groaned, the Corlith starting to wake up. Make that 10 minutes, Hallie muttered. She grabbed a set of restraints from the nearest operative's belt and tossed them to Lux. Secure them. All of them. Use their own equipment. Lux caught the restraints reflexively, stared at them, then at the unconscious operatives scattered around their destroyed quarters. I do not know how to— Just make sure they can't move when they wake up. Tight on the wrists, but not so tight you cut off circulation. We're criminals now, not monsters. That is not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. Now move. Lux moved, scuttling between the fallen operatives with jerky, nervous motions. Her species wasn't built for violence. The Kepri were scholars, engineers, artists. Watching her try to restrain trained enforcement officers with trembling hands would have been funny if the situation weren't so completely, catastrophically bad. Hallie turned back to the terminal, her mind racing. The security network was locked down tight. Multiple layers of encryption, biometric verification, intrusion detection that would flag any unauthorized access within seconds. Breaking in wasn't impossible, but doing it fast enough to matter? That required either incredible skill or incredible luck. She had neither. What she did have was a Kepri roommate who'd been suspiciously modest about her technical abilities. "Lux," Hallie called, not looking away from the screen. "How good are you with network architecture? And don't give me that 'I am just a simple student' nonsense. I've seen your coursework. You calculate hyperspace trajectories for fun." There was a pause. Then, quietly, "My people designed the communication protocols the Galactic Union uses. I may have some familiarity with the underlying systems." Some familiarity. Right. Hallie gestured at the terminal. "Get over here. I can get us through the initial access layer, but after that, I'm going to need you to work some magic." Lux finished restraining the Felian, who was still unconscious and probably going to need medical attention for that arm, and approached the terminal. Her compound eyes scanned the display, antennae quivering. "This is illegal. Extremely illegal. We could be charged with—" "We're already facing charges for assaulting enforcement officers. Might as well add unauthorized network access to the list." Hallie pulled up the security partition, her fingers dancing across the interface. "Come on, work with me here. You guide, I'll execute. 10 minutes, remember?" 8 minutes now, actually. Time was doing that fun thing where it moved way too fast. Lux made a chittering sound. Anxiety. But also something else. Focus, maybe. She leaned closer to the terminal, 2 hands on the interface, 2 hands gesturing as she thought out loud. "The primary encryption is standard Malrin cipher, 3-layer authentication. But the backup routing goes through a Kepri-designed protocol, which means, yes, there is a maintenance access port. Here." She indicated a subsection of the network map. "If we route through the environmental controls, they share the same physical infrastructure, we can bypass the main security checkpoint." Environmental controls. You want to hack the security system through the air conditioning? It is not air conditioning. It is a complex atmospheric regulation system, but, yes, essentially. Hallie laughed, short and sharp. "That's the dumbest thing I've heard all day. And I just fought 6 people in my pajamas. Let's do it." They worked in tandem, Hallie navigating the interface, Lux calling out commands and corrections, both of them hyper-aware of the unconscious operatives behind them, and the seconds ticking away. The environmental controls gave them access to maintenance protocols, which connected to life support, which, through some architectural decision that made sense to exactly nobody, had a backdoor into security monitoring. "Got it," Hallie breathed, pulling up the camera feeds. There they were, dozens of recordings from throughout the station, including 3 feeds from their quarters. The footage was time-stamped, catalogued, backed up to multiple servers. And it showed everything. Hallie breaking the Felian's arm, the fight, the violence, all of it in perfect high-definition clarity. "Delete it," Lux said, her voice urgent. "Quickly, before—" "Wait." Hallie leaned closer to the screen, her eyes narrowing. "What's that?" She'd pulled up the metadata for the camera feeds, standard practice, making sure the files were actually deleted and not just hidden, and something caught her attention. The recordings had tags, classification markers that indicated why they were being monitored. But their quarters weren't just under standard surveillance. They were flagged. High-priority monitoring with a direct feed to somewhere. An off-network location that wasn't part of station security. "That's weird," Hallie muttered. She followed the data trail, her curiosity overriding her common sense. The feed went through 3 proxy servers, encrypted at each hop, ending at a private network that had no business being connected to a training facility. "Hallie," Lux said nervously, "we do not have time for—" "They were already watching us. Before tonight. This monitoring was set up weeks ago." That stopped Lux cold. Her antennae went rigid again. "What?" "Someone knew they were coming for you. Someone set up surveillance specifically on our quarters." Hallie pulled up the access logs, her hands moving on autopilot now, muscle memory from countless hours of security training taking over. And if they were watching us, they might have been watching others too. She was right. The network was full of flagged locations, high-priority monitoring targets scattered throughout the station. Trainee quarters, mostly, and when she pulled up the resident lists for those quarters, a pattern emerged. Kepri, Hulmex, Felian, species that were currently under pressure from the Genetic Preservation Act, species whose families had resisted the breeding programs, the compliance quotas, the entire apparatus of control that the Galactic Union had wrapped in the language of conservation and protection. "Oh," Hallie said softly. "Oh, this is so much worse than I thought." Lux moved closer, reading over her shoulder. As the data loaded, her whole body began to tremble. "These are arrest orders. All of them. Scheduled raids over the next month. They are targeting everyone who doesn't comply." "Yeah." Hallie's jaw tightened. The Genetic Preservation Act isn't about preservation at all. It's about control. They're using it to round up dissidents, to force compliance, to— An alarm blared through the room. Not the station alert. Something else. The terminal flashed red. "Intrusion detected," Lux squeaked. "They know we are in the system." "Then we work faster." Hallie's fingers flew across the interface. Deleting their footage wasn't enough now. Couldn't be enough. This was bigger than one assault. Bigger than saving themselves. This was institutional corruption on a scale that made her assault charges look like a parking violation. "Lux," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline and the pain in her ribs and the growing certainty that they were in way, way over their heads. "How do you feel about taking down a conspiracy?"
What?"
"We can delete our footage and run. Play defense. Hope we don't get caught. Or—" Hallie pulled up the network map again, this time focusing on the off-network servers, the hidden databases, the places where the real information was stored. "Or we burn it all down. Delete the arrest orders, expose the conspiracy, make it impossible for them to continue using the Act as a weapon." "That is— Hallie, that is insane?" "Yeah. Also the right thing to do." Behind them, Commander Thux groaned, starting to wake up. 5 minutes, maybe less. Lux stared at the screen, her compound eyes reflecting the scrolling data. Then, in a voice that was still scared, but had something else underneath, something like determination, she said, "Show me what to delete." They worked like their lives depended on it, because they did. Hallie handled the deletions and data corruption, covering their tracks while simultaneously making the tracks lead everywhere and nowhere. Lux navigated the network architecture, finding hidden databases and backup servers, routing their attack through so many proxies and redirects that tracing it would take weeks. They deleted footage. They corrupted arrest orders. They pulled files on the breeding programs, the compliance quotas, the ways the Genetic Preservation Act was being weaponized, and they sent all of it. Every damning document, every classified memo, every piece of evidence to independent news networks, opposition council members, watchdog organizations, anyone who might actually do something with the information. The alarms got louder. The terminal flashed more urgently. Behind them, more operatives were waking up, struggling against their restraints. "Almost there," Hallie muttered, wiping databases, inserting false data trails, doing everything she could to make sure that when the authorities tried to piece together what happened, they'd find nothing but digital ghosts and dead ends. "Upload complete," Lux announced, her voice shaking. "The files have been distributed. I routed them through many places. It will be difficult to suppress." Difficult? Love that. Hallie initiated the final purge, a cascade deletion that would wipe their access logs and destroy the evidence of their intrusion. The terminal screamed warnings at her, but she ignored them. 3 minutes now, maybe 2. The last file deleted. The screen went dark. Then, slowly, it rebooted, showing nothing but the standard station login screen. Clean, empty. No evidence of what they'd just done, except for the 6 restrained enforcement officers and the completely destroyed quarters. But hey, you couldn't win everything. "We need to leave," Lux said, stating the obvious. "Now. Immediately. Before—" Footsteps in the corridor. Heavy boots, moving fast. Backup had arrived. Hallie looked at Lux, then at the door, then at the ventilation grate in the ceiling. Too small, wouldn't work. The window, 3 stories up, but maybe. No, definitely not. Which left exactly one option. The maintenance corridor she'd mentioned earlier. The one with the terrible security. "Come on," she said, grabbing what she could. ID chips, credit chips, anything small and valuable. Time to see if that unsecured access was really as unsecured as I thought. They ran, leaving behind the unconscious operatives, the destroyed quarters, and any chance of graduating from Theta 9 with clean records. But they took with them something more valuable. The truth, scattered across the galaxy like seeds, ready to grow into something the Galactic Union couldn't control. Assuming they survived long enough to see it happen. The thing about maintenance corridors on Galactic Union facilities is that they're designed for robots and really dedicated janitors, which means they're cramped, poorly lit, and full of pipes that seem specifically placed to hit you in the head when you're running for your life. Hallie had already collected 2 new bruises and what felt like a minor concussion by the time they'd made it 3 sections away from their quarters. Lux was doing better. Her smaller frame and 4-limbed scrambling gave her an advantage in the tight spaces, but her breathing had that high-pitched wheeze that meant she was terrified. Where are we going?" Lux gasped, her antennae brushing against the low ceiling. "Hangar Bay, Section 9. Hallie paused at a junction, listening for pursuit. Footsteps echoed from somewhere, close or far, impossible to tell in these metal tunnels. "We need a ship." "We cannot simply take a ship. There are procedures, authorizations, flight plans." "Yeah, and we don't have time for any of them." Hallie moved again, following the maintenance route she'd memorized weeks ago during a particularly boring lecture on station infrastructure. "We've got maybe 20 minutes before they lock down the entire facility. After that, we're trapped." 15 minutes, actually. She was being optimistic. They emerged from the maintenance corridor into a storage area. Equipment, lockers, supply crates, the kind of places where station personnel kept things they'd deal with later and then forgot about entirely. Hallie grabbed a maintenance uniform from one of the lockers, tossed it to Lux. "Put this on. Cover your markings. This will not fool anyone. I am clearly in maintenance gear, doing maintenance things. People see what they expect to see. Trust me." Lux pulled on the uniform, which was designed for a Hulmex, and hung on her like a tent, while Hallie found one that almost fit her. The disguise wouldn't hold up to scrutiny, but it might buy them 30 seconds. And 30 seconds was 29 seconds more than they'd have otherwise. They moved through Section 11, then 10, then 9, trying to look purposeful. trying to look like they belonged. Twice they passed security patrols. Both times Hallie kept her head down, kept walking, radiating the kind of "I'm supposed to be here" confidence that was 80% of any successful infiltration. The patrols didn't stop them. The hangar bay entrance did. 2 guards, both armed, both looking significantly more alert than usual. Between them, a security checkpoint with biometric scanners and what looked like new verification protocols that definitely hadn't been there this morning. Lockdown protocols, 1 guard, a corelith with a nasty-looking rifle, announced as they approached. All personnel must verify identity and purpose before accessing hangar facilities. Hallie kept her expression neutral, her posture relaxed. Inside, she was calculating angles, distances, whether she could take both guards before they could raise an alarm. The math wasn't good. She was already injured, already exhausted, and these 2 looked competent. But she also wasn't leaving Lux behind. "Maintenance request," she said, her voice flat and bored. "Fuel line check on transport vessels. Standard monthly inspection." The corelith scanned a data pad. "No maintenance requests scheduled for tonight." "That's because someone screwed up the scheduling." "Again?" Hallie sighed dramatically. "Look, I just want to finish my shift and go to bed. You want to explain to hangar operations why the inspections didn't happen? Be my guest. I'll wait here." It was a gamble. Bureaucracy versus security, the eternal struggle. For a moment, the guards exchanged glances. Then the second one, a Mulren with tired eyes, waved them through. "Make it quick, and stay in designated maintenance zones." They were through. Just like that. Hallie didn't let herself relax until they were past the checkpoint and into the hangar proper. A vast space filled with ships of various sizes, from single-pilot scouts to multi-crew transports. That was... Lux started. "Not over yet. Come on." Hallie headed for the smaller vessels, the ones used for supply runs and short-range transport. Easier to operate, less likely to have advanced security. She found one that looked promising, a Kepri manufactured courier ship, compact and efficient, and approached the access panel. "Can you fly this?" Lux's antennae perked up. "This is a Shimmer-class courier. My people built these. I could fly this in my sleep." "Great. Don't sleep. Fly it awake." Hallie pulled out the access credentials she'd grabbed from their quarters. Not hers, someone else's from 3 months ago. Probably inactive, but maybe. Just maybe. The panel blinked green. The access ramp descended with a soft hydraulic hiss. Sometimes the universe gave you gifts. You didn't question them. They boarded quickly, Hallie sealing the ramp behind them, while Lux scrambled to the pilot's seat. The interior was cramped but functional. Typical Kepri design, efficient and elegant. The engines hummed to life, systems initializing with cheerful beeps that seemed wildly inappropriate given the circumstances. "Pre-flight checks we'll take. Skip them. We launch now, or we don't launch at all." Lux made a distressed, chittering sound, but complied, her 4 hands dancing across the controls with practiced ease. The ship lifted, smooth, graceful, completely at odds with the chaos they were fleeing. Then the alarms started. Station-wide alerts this time, impossible to ignore. Red lights flashed throughout the hangar. The other ships began emergency lockdown protocols, magnetic clamps engaging, blast doors starting to close. "Lux! I see them!" The courier shot forward, weaving between larger vessels, heading for the launch corridor. The blast doors were closing fast. 5 meters, 4, 3. They made it through with maybe half a meter to spare. Hallie felt the ship scrape against the door edge, heard metal shriek against metal. And then they were out into open space, the station falling away behind them. Pursuit ships launched immediately, 3 of them, sleek interceptors designed for exactly this scenario. "They are faster than us," Lux said, her voice tight with concentration. "I can evade for perhaps 5 minutes, but get us to hyperspace, nearest jump point. That is 4 minutes away. Then be creative." Lux was creative. She flew the courier like it was an extension of her body, pulling maneuvers that made Hallie's stomach revolt and her broken ribs scream protest. The Kepri sent them into the debris field from a recent mining operation, using the scattered asteroids as cover, making the larger interceptors work for every meter they gained. 2 minutes to jump point. The interceptors were closing, weapons charging. 1 minute. Warning lights flashed across the console. Weapons lock. Multiple hostiles. Very bad situation. 30 seconds. Lux initiated the hyperspace calculations, the ship's systems whining as they prepared for the jump. 10 seconds. The interceptors fired, plasma bolts that lit up the void, tracking toward them. "Now!" Hallie shouted. Lux activated the hyperdrive. Reality bent, twisted, and snapped. The stars stretched into lines, then vanished entirely as they punched through into hyperspace. The plasma bolts, the interceptors, the entire mess behind them. Gone, lost in normal space while they raced away faster than light could follow. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The ship hummed around them, stable and calm, completely oblivious to the fact that its occupants had just thrown away their entire futures. "So," Hallie said eventually, pressing a hand to her ribs, "that could have gone worse." Lux turned to stare at her, all 4 arms trembling. "Worse? How could that possibly have been worse? We could be dead. We're not. That's a win." Hallie pulled up the navigation console, checking their heading. "Where are we going?" "I set random coordinates. We are heading toward the Outer Rim territories, beyond primary Union jurisdiction." "Good thinking." Hallie accessed the communication systems, pulling up galactic news feeds. It took a moment to load. Hyperspace made real-time communication tricky. But when the feeds finally appeared, her eyebrows rose. The data they'd released was spreading. Fast. News networks across the galaxy were reporting on the Genetic Preservation Act abuses, the forced breeding programs, the systematic targeting of dissidents. Council members were resigning. Protests were erupting on a dozen worlds. "It's working," Lux whispered, reading over Hallie's shoulder. "The information. People are listening." "Some people." Hallie scrolled through the feeds, noting the official denials, the attempts at damage control. But yeah, it's enough. A new message appeared, encrypted, routed through so many proxies that tracing it would be functionally impossible. Hallie opened it cautiously. The message was simple. Coordinates, followed by 3 words. "We found you." "That's ominous," Hallie muttered. She checked the source. Nothing. Just ghosts and redirects, then checked the coordinates. A location in the Outer Rim, exactly where they were heading. Another message. "The displaced welcomes those who fight institutional darkness. Safe harbor offered. No obligation." Hallie looked at Lux. "What do you think?" The Kepri's antennae quivered. "I think we have few options, and perhaps we have done enough. We could hide, start over." "Could." Hallie studied the coordinates, the message, the implications. "Or we could keep fighting. This displaced group, they're looking for people like us, people who've been targeted, who've fought back. That is dangerous. Everything's dangerous now." Lux was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, "Why did you help me? You could have let them take me. You would have been safe." "You're my friend," Hallie said simply. "That's enough." Lux made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and her antennae lifted. "Then Then we fight. Together. Hallie grinned, despite the pain, despite the exhaustion, despite everything. She set their course for the coordinates, toward the unknown, toward whatever came next. Behind them, on Outpost Theta 9, Commander Thux finally freed himself from his restraints. He found his entire team incapacitated, his equipment destroyed, and absolutely no evidence of what had happened. Just a message on the console, glowing in the darkness. Should have brought more people. H. He stared at it for a long time, nursing his broken knee and his wounded pride, and made a mental note. Never underestimate humans, or their friends.